Bom dia, buenos dias, and good morning to everyone. Good morning, Tabinda. It's a real pleasure to be here at Forecasting Healthy Futures and to share this space with Tabinda, who speaks to us directly from Pakistan. And I'm sorry, Tabinda, you could not be here with us, but it's really great that we are still able to have this conversation in the hybrid format that will also be throughout the event. So thank you, Tabinda.
You're welcome, Joanna, and I'm just looking forward to partnering with you in this conversation as I was looking forward to being in Brazil. But I'm definitely envying the togetherness everybody is sharing today at this forum. But I also believe that what we are discussing, it transcends border. What's pertinent here is pertinent everywhere. I was listening to Mr. Hugh Montgomery's talk, and such a good way to set us up to understand how we can move towards solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank for the Forecasting Healthy Futures for this invitation. Let me start with a quick conversation and just saying that this year's summit is titled Sustainable Ecosystems for Health. And this phrase does capture a lot of the work that we do at the Pan-Amazon Network for Bioeconomy and also at Pathfinder International. I'm Joanna Oliveira, as mentioned. I'm from WRI Brazil, World Resources Institute Brazil, but I'm acting as Executive Secretary for the Pan-Amazon Network for Bioeconomy. And this is a multi-sectoral alliance that promotes a sustainable, locally led bioeconomy in the whole Amazon region. I do want to emphasize here the critical role that the Amazon plays in global climate change and in global health, as Professor has just posed it with much data and metrics that we do not, that we can't not take into account. The forests of the biome, it regulates climate, it safeguards biodiversity, and it sustains millions, but we all know here that it is under threat. So it's sometimes when we think about the Amazon, I don't know if any of you have been to the Amazon, but sometimes we imagine this broccoli carpet of green that we see from above. And that's partially true, but the Amazon does also have 47 million people living in it. So when we're talking about safeguarding biodiversity and protecting the Amazon, we do also have to consider the population that's living in there, this local population. And so that's why bioeconomy is a key solution for this. It integrates biodiversity conservation with socio-economic development, and that's what I wanted to tell you a bit more. I don't know if anyone of you do know what's bioeconomy. Could I see some hands? Bioeconomy? Yes? Thank you. Great. It is a concept that's under dispute. There's different interpretations, and I won't go into that because we can have that conversation at dinner today. But in the Pan-Amazon Network, we're focusing on a bioeconomy that we say that it's good for people, for nature, and for climate. So it's an economy that is compatible with the biome, compatible with the standing forest, but it also respects cultural aspirations of its population. So there's an important people pillar in this concept. This, I don't know if have you tasted açaí in the corner shops, or cupuaçu, andiroba. There are many products from the forest. That's all bioeconomy. Community tourism is bioeconomy. So it's products and services that are compatible with these safeguards. And the network, Tabinda, we gather different sectors to promote this economy. So I'm saying here, finance institutions, research institutions, impact investors, the cooperatives and associations on the floor, local producers, and also, of course, civil society, which I here also represent. The intention here is bringing everyone to the table, because there are other networks that will be focusing on research institutes or focus on financial institutions, have their own coalitions as well. But we need everyone at the table so we can act together and bridge the gaps that we're seeing, so to be more an agile action into changing, into promoting this solution. I think this multi-sector alliance also does resonate with Pathfinder. Is that it, Tabinda?
Absolutely, Joanna. I echo that. I also echo your thanks to the team of the Forecasting Healthy Future Summit and Malaria No More for making this possible, what we are doing right now. And I agree with you. Multi-sectoral coordination is a very integral part of what Pathfinder does. So just to set the background for this, our work at Pathfinder is very community-centered, and we place women and girls at the center of everything that we do, aiding their access to health, reproductive health, and agency, right? And what evidence we see from the ground coming day in and day out is that all of this does not happen in silos, and a woman's life is not boxed into certain labels or into certain sectors. And as we move forward, climate change has fundamentally altered the way we are living, right? We often think of climate change as rising temperatures or natural disasters, but we know that it's so much more. Our lived realities, they underscore that this is not just a crisis, it's a public health situation. And it manifests as insidious stressors on health systems, but also other systems in that ecosystem, and also sometimes in forms of crisis. So I absolutely agree with you. And one of the things that is very close to Pathfinder's mission is integrating agency of women and their health access to health rights, right? Because we feel that a healthy woman, a woman who has access to livelihoods and is resilient and demonstrates leadership in the communities to make change, I think that's one of the most powerful things we do at Pathfinder. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabinda. Hearing from the ground is an important part of this, bringing everyone to the table. It's not multi-sector and it's not cross-sector if we're actually just having the conversations in our suits and in the air conditioning. So that's an invitation also that we make further space or broader space for local voices. I do want to catch on the point that, again, that we're under threat, as we've clearly posed in the previous panel, or the previous session. And climate change, we all know here, affects disproportionately the ones who least collaborated or impacted, caused climate change. So that means local communities, indigenous populations, women in the front lines, as Tabinda was also mentioning. And as also Tabinda was mentioning, we already see the impacts, and that's the same case in the Amazon. The droughts in the rivers who have isolated communities, the flowering and harvesting cycles of different products as andiroba and cupuaçu are all being affected. The management of fishing, sustainable fishing of pirarucu has also been affected. So it's not something that people are not feeling. We are already enduring those challenges, and we're having to adapt. And again, we know that if we don't do anything, the cost is really high. Sometimes we hear from investors that bioeconomy is too risky, that it's just a potential, a promise. But we're looking at the investment of doing it, but we're not looking at the cost if we're doing the do-nothing cost, right? And that's one that we also have to emphasize. So that's why bioeconomy matters so much. And when I say bioeconomy, it's not only the products. So I'm not saying here that we need to make new commodities out of the forest. That's not the message. We're looking at the processes and the integration of the ecological balance and the sustainable livelihoods. And I think that's the message that I also want to emphasize. So a strong bioeconomy may prevent deforestation, and that impacts whole climate, global climate. It preserves medical plants, if we want to connect here with the health system, ecosystem, and it ensures resilient local food systems. And I know that we're having a session later today focusing on food systems and its connections and bioeconomy. Today, sometimes when we think about acai, we're thinking about big exports, but bioeconomy is also important for regional food sovereignty, but also for local. That means the fairs and the trades that happens within the communities. And in that sense, it directly impacts health. So my last point, I think that what I would like to make is that bioeconomy, it might be invisible to national accounts. So if you're looking at the GDP of Brazil, you don't have a bioeconomy contribution to the GDP at this point, because it's not an economy of scale. We're discussing within the network, it's more an economy of scope. So it's a basket of products, and we need to aggregate all of those products to be able to see how this sector the potential and the reality of this sector. And actually in WI Brazil last year, 2 years ago, we've launched a study coordinated also by Professor Carlos Nobre, and we were able to analyze by only 13 products of the Amazon, Brazilian Amazon, And we know that the indigenous and local populations use more than 270 products, so this is really conservative measure. We have an estimate that with 13 products, the bioeconomy GDP contribution to the Brazilian GDP is around 12.3 billion reais, in an estimate $2.3 billion a year. So if we're saying this is a potential and it might have an influence, we're saying here, no, this is already a reality. We're just not accounting it because we're not aggregating all that data, because it has a different logic than what we are used to. So there's a need to recognize this sector, and this is entangled with all of the systems look, because we can't promote bioeconomy if we don't have infrastructure, we don't have capacities, if climate change is affecting all of this. So I think recognizing and investing in bioeconomy is not just an economic opportunity, and I know Tabinda also does have the economic pillar when we're looking at women and girls' health, but it's also about inclusion, it's about equity and resilience in the face of climate change. And Tabinda, I think this, again, these interdependencies and the need for this integrated look is also that's in your sphere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And ditto on everything that you're saying. And, I would just like to kind of connect it to my work and zoom in on how it plays out in the universe, right, for women and girls, and how we, and on the ground, are connecting with WASH services, reproductive health, food security, to form those multi-sectoral solutions. I mean, one of the experiences you talked about, the country examples in Pakistan, was the creation of the first multi-sectoral coordination committee just for climate change and health. This is going forward, but this multi-sectoral work, it's not always easy, as you and I both know, right? And there's so many departments working in parallel at the country level, but also at the global public health arenas, and how to facilitate multi-sectoral narration on that, and solution designing. I think that's one thing that we do. But systems are, of course, at the core of everything that Pathfinder does. And when we delved into the health systems work with the climate resilience approach for the very first time, that's when we understood that there's been so many needs in countries that are on the forefront of climate change right now. 10 most affected countries. And yet, when it comes to resilience assessment, there are some gaps, but there are also gaps around supply chains, right? We need to make sure that they're uninterrupted. So climate resilience, resilient health systems play a very strong role in how we want to continue the work that we're doing. At the same time, advocating for the integration of the work on the biodiversity talks, exactly what you guys are doing, right? Livelihoods are important for women, and they're very much associated with agriculture. Sustainable agriculture and food systems are the need, especially in the context of the global south and the countries that we work in. So as you said, I mean, just to wrap it up, everything that you're saying, it's so similar. This is one of those areas where we are able to connect on the global best practices, but contextualize solutions to the needs on the ground and take it to the women and girls who are going to be, by the way, on the front line of all the repercussions that happen due to climate change. Thank you.
Perfect, yes. I think building on from your argument also with the gaps and the metrics that we need, we see the same thing happening within bioeconomy in the Pan-Amazon. As I was saying, there is still a lot of invisible or unknown data that has to be analyzed and studied so that we have a stronger solutions for the territory. And the network, while we're gathering all these multi-sectoral allies and stakeholders, we're doing this in a coordinated way. At the Pan-Amazon Network, we have 5 task forces. So we're developing metrics and data to strengthen it as a sector so that's understood, and then maybe it will be incorporated into national accounts and into the government's planning and financial planning and investment, which is important to mobilize. That's another task force where we're acting, when we want to mobilize finance. And I think, again, the connections, just bringing one example, is sometimes when we talk to investors for bioeconomy, they'll say, oh, I've already mobilized mobilize enough funds. I have new funds, I have blended finance, tons of mechanisms to invest in bioeconomy, but there's not enough pipeline of projects. They're not mature enough, they're not structured enough. And then we go talk to the producers and associations and say, we're here, we need the money, but they have such big tickets and they need all of this compliance, this bureaucracy that's not compatible with the context. How do we bridge those two sides? And I think that's the coordinated effort of multi-stakeholder alliances. So how do we connect, and what intermediaries, changes in requisites that we need, maturing and a capacity building that we need to strengthen in the territory. And I think that's the beauty of these connections when we bring different stakeholders. So within the network, we have this CCC approach of we want to connect these different stakeholders and initiatives. There's a lot going on in the Amazon, but it's fragmented. It's a territory that has a difficulty in connectivity, and that means transportation, but that also means internet. But we also want to converge visions, because if every one of us is saying a different focus and a different narrative to the solution, we're just tiny, small voices. But how can we, the sum of us, be stronger than that? And so the convergence of an unison, I don't know if that exists in English, but a unique voice may resonate stronger. And we want to communicate all of these experiences so that they're brought to light and they're seen as a possible pathway to, well, fight climate change and avoid a tipping point in the Amazon, but also to promote quality and thriving livelihoods. So I think my last thing is, my final message would be, and I would love to hear yours, Tabinda, as well, that solutions are systemic, right? We can't just look at, well, bioeconomy, I'm going to focus in this association here. We need the whole group. Association here. The whole integration of the systems, and so that we have a systemic change. And I guess that's the whole point of working together in an agile manner.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the point over here is, what are the systems for and how are they serving? There is no easy answer. So I think a realization of that is also important at this moment, you know, after the world has undergone very, you know, significant changes in the development sector. We also need to look forward on creating new solutions and to understanding that this is you know, this is a situation that's not always going to be easy. Collaboration is an art. It needs to be invested in. We also need to look at how we can mobilize domestic resources in the countries that we're working and advocate for them and advocate for the role of the communities and local solutions, which are often, you know, very contextualized. People of the communities, women of the communities know what they want. And their input into the systems so that the systems can serve best is my key priority and advocacy ask. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tabinda. I think we're running out of time, but it was great talking to you, even though we didn't meet in person. We'll think of you during dinner, and I'll see you all during the day. Thank you again for Casting Healthy Futures for this invitation. And I hope two of these solutions that may seem really odd, but they have interesting and connecting approaches of integration and a system and ecosystem perspective to how we're facing our problems, does also inspire us throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great dinner.